Hey, welcome into the Wells Tech Garage for Wells TechConnect episode number 5. Last week during our live broadcast, we talked about EGR valves, and in particular this EGR valve right here on a 2006 Chrysler Town & Country with the 3.8 liter V6. We talked about how it is most commonly going to be the repair. It's going to need an EGR valve. We had code P0404, and most commonly it'll need this to be replaced. But we also got into how to test the computer-controlled circuits and what exactly a MOSFET is. So it was a really interesting class. If you didn't see it, go back in our recent videos and take a look at that. But we did get some questions from you guys during that. So Paulo asked, is it possible to repair this part? Is it possible to repair the EGR valve? And I guess a short answer would be no. The solenoid and all the electronics of the valve and the position sensor on top are all part of the valve. If either of those fail, the valve needs to be replaced as an assembly. Now in this valve's case, the pintle got stuck inside from carbon buildup from the exhaust flowing through it. It is possible that if you were to spray some brake cleaner or something in here, some sort of cleaner in here and try and clean it out, it might start working again. But there's not really any other way to get in here and repair this thing. So I would say, Paulo, that no, the valve is not repairable. So that brings us to the next question. Drew asked, is your part improved? Is our EGR valve improved? And this is a really, really great question, Drew. And that brings me into a good example that I have here of right on those same lines. So our head of our engineering department, Tom, brought this repair order into me of his son who took his vehicle in to have it diagnosed on the other side of the state. He took it in, had it diagnosed. He had a check engine light on his 2007 Equinox. Had a check engine light on. So they pulled his codes and determined that it had a P0404, P0405. So they recommended that he replace the EGR valve. So he decided to take the vehicle home and put an EGR valve on himself. He put in one of our parts and installed it and cleared all his codes out and took it for a drive, and his light came back on. So he took it back to the dealership and asked for it to be diagnosed again. And upon their diagnosis this time, they recommended that he put an OE EGR valve on. So he went ahead and followed the recommendation, put an OE or original equipment valve, EGR valve on the car. They cleared out the codes, drove it again, still had the same problem. Well, it turns out the entire time it wasn't even a bad EGR valve. It was a bad EGR pipe right here. If you can see this nice crack right here, that was the problem the entire time. But what this really addresses is the stigma that's out there for aftermarket parts. That stigma is that aftermarket parts are considered to be inferior to the OE. And with our parts, that's not going to be the case. All of our parts, all of the Wells parts that we manufacture are going to be OE quality or better. And also, we're a tier 1 supplier for the OE. So it is possible that that part that's on your car factory could be our part. So just want to try and clear up that stigma a little bit. All of our parts are tested. All of our parts are inspected. When our engineers decide to make a new part, they don't just go out and try and duplicate the exact OE part. They look for any flaws or any problems that they had. And that brings me back to your question, Drew. We do improve our parts. This part right here, this EGR valve was very, very common, and we talked about that in the last broadcast, that this valve is very, very common on Chrysler vehicles because the position sensor inside of it fails. And what our engineers and our clean room team went out and developed was a new circuit board inside there. They developed an improved circuit board because these contacts right here that the position sensor touches to make contact with the pins of the connector would actually break off of the circuit board. They would rub off or get a hole in them, creating a non-contacting surface, so the position sensor would fail. So our engineers and clean room guys went out and found a way to better attach the contacts and with a better material to increase the longevity of the valve. So Drew, your question is very relevant. Yes, we improve our parts. If there's any sort of flaws, anything like that, we improve them. If you guys remember the original DPFEs on Fords when they came out were all an aluminum body. Our engineering team went out and developed a plastic body that doesn't actually let the exhaust gas inside. They use 2 individual pressure sensors inside. So there's another improvement of a part. So I hope by talking about this stuff, it just helps to clear up that aftermarket parts stigma a little bit, and just so you guys understand that stigma is not the case with our parts. So, all right, let's talk about our next class now. Our next class is going to be June 2nd at noon, like always, Thursday, June 2nd, and we're going to be covering the cooling fan system on a 2007 Grand Prix. The cooling fans run on a relay system, and it's kind of a little complicated. There's 3 relays to control 2 fans, so we're going to show you guys what's going on with that and how to test it. We're going to dive into series circuits and parallel circuits and tell you guys what that's all about, and show you how to inspect and diagnose a faulty cooling fan system on a later model GM. So that's going to be June 2nd at noon, and then we'll see you guys back the following week for TechConnect episode number 6. So we'll see you guys then. Have a great weekend.